My name is Elena Ward, and at 35, I thought I understood what family first meant until the night it was used as a lever against my front door. The week had already been busy, quarter end close at the tech firm where I manage a small accounting team, a broken garbage disposal I'd fixed myself with a how-to video, and the usual Sunday dinner my mother insists will keep us close. I went because I love them. I left understanding closeness can become a chokehold. I didn't stumble into stability. After college, I took the first steady job I could get in the city. Junior accountant, fluorescent lights, coffee that tasted like cardboard. While friends pinballed between passions, I learned the unglamorous art of budgets that balance and spreadsheets that reconcile when no one is watching. A dozen years later, I'm a senior manager. The salary is good, not gilded. In this economy, comfortable is what you call it when every bill clears and a little trickles into savings. The place I live in, the place at the center of this story, is a 2-unit duplex on a quiet street 15 minutes from downtown. I bought it because my rent jumped 3 times in 4 years, and one night hunched over a wobbly kitchen table, I realized I'd paid enough to have equity in a home I didn't own. That was the spark. I drafted a plan, no weekend brunches just to catch up, no new shoes, unless the old ones surrendered, no vacations except the kind where you open the window and breathe. I picked up weekend bookkeeping for small businesses, 7 days a week for 5 years. Every dinner invitation got translated into billable hours in my head. Most were too expensive. The day the mortgage was approved, I sat in my car with the email open and cried quiet. Embarrassed tears that blurred the screen. I had scraped together $60,000 for a down payment without help or inheritance. It felt like someone had finally handed me the steering wheel to my own life. The duplex wasn't fancy 2 bedrooms per unit, a shared wall, almond appliances from another era, but it had good bones and a workable plan. I would live on one side, rent the other, and let the rent help pay the note. Some people call it house hacking. I called it refusing to drown. It needed love, and I had stubbornness. I painted every wall, learned to run a sander without chewing the floor to splinters, and swapped brass light fixtures that hummed like insects for quiet LEDs. My hands stayed speckled with primer for months. I liked it. It meant the place was becoming mine, not just on paper, but in the scuffs and corrections of lived-in effort. My parents, Martin and Lila, consider themselves steadfast traditionalists. In practice, that looks like endless emergency lanes opening for my younger brother Evan. He is charming in the way that tends to be expensive. He's 32 and can talk a hiring manager into believing he's the turnaround they're waiting for until 18 months later when he isn't. He married Bianca at 25. They have 5-year-old twins Leo and Mia who are bright and loud and used to getting a yes on try number 3. Bianca hasn't worked full-time since the kids were born. Childcare is too costly. Her old boss was impossible. School schedules are unforgiving. There is always a reason. My parents have bridged the gaps, rent shortfalls, car repairs, preschool tuition. Family helps family, my mother says, and I never know how to answer without sounding ungrateful or unwise. 3 weeks before the dinner, Evan called to say his hours were cut at the warehouse. I offered to polish his resume and mock interview with him, which I did. What I didn't offer was my home. Their lease ends in 2 months. The rent they pay is inflated. Their landlord is allegedly unresponsive. The last time I visited, toys colonized the hallway, a stain sprawled across the living room carpet, and a shoulder-height dent scarred the drywall near the stairs. Evan swore the wall looked like that when they moved in. Maybe it did. I didn't argue. But a thought lodged. People are careful with what they believe is theirs. A week before the dinner, my mother phoned just to catch up. Midway through a recap of her book club, she asked lightly how my tenant on the other side was doing. I told her the truth. Derek, a quiet software engineer who'd been there a year, had given notice new job out of state. What convenient timing, she said and laughed. The comment barely registered. Later, I would replay that laugh. Sunday dinner smelled like rosemary chicken and lemon. My mother's comfort food for triangulating conversations. I brought a bottle of Pinot and a bakery cheesecake. Dad was glued to the game beer, sweating on the side table. Evan slid in late and sagged onto the couch performing exhaustion. The twins sprinted to the playroom. Bianca drifted to the kitchen to help, which mostly meant narrating how she would have done things differently. We ate. We made small talk. I mentioned a project I'd closed at work. Dad bragged about a golf tournament at the retirement community where he volunteers. Evan mused about maybe getting into real estate, which gave me a private bitter laugh. Dessert arrived, and so did the point. Bianca cleared her throat the way you do when an announcement needs a stage. "So, Elena," she said, voice dipped in warm sugar with Derek moving out, "the timing is perfect for us to move in." She smiled at my parents as if it were a group gift. "We've thought it through. The master needs a proper renovation, obviously, and the twins will need separate rooms soon, so we'll take your side of the duplex since it's bigger. You can move into the other unit for now, or there are really cute studios near your office." My fork hovered over the plate. The room tilted in that slow-motion way that feels like you've stood up too fast. "I'm sorry, what?" My father set down his glass expression, composed like a tone he'd practiced. "Family is more important than money," he said. "Evan has a family to support. You're one person. You don't need all that space." I stared at him. "Dad, this isn't about space. It's about the mortgage I pay and the rental income that helps me pay it. It's about the fact that my name is the one on the deed." Bianca's smile thinned. "We're not asking for a handout," she said. "We'll help with the mortgage once we're back on our feet. But we can't squeeze into the rental side. It's too small and the kitchen is dated. I've already pinned layout ideas. Opening the wall between the second bedroom and the little office would make a perfect playroom. And stainless appliances, trust me, it's what the space needs." "Knock down a wall," I repeated, because sometimes echoing the absurd is the only way to hold it still. "In my house. Our house," my father corrected softly stern. "This is a family matter." My mother reached for my hand. "Sweetheart, we're not trying to push you out. Just share. For a few years. 3-5, it takes time to save when you have children." My cheeks burned. Share means everyone contributes. Are you proposing market rate rent with a lease and security deposit? Responsible for damages? A clear end date. Silence bloomed. Evan studied his plate like it held answers. Bianca's jaw set. My mother sighed. My father's frown deepened into disappointment. "You've always been so independent," my mother said, as if naming a diagnosis. "You don't have children. You can adjust. Evan can't." There it was, the verdict I'd heard in 100 smaller ways. Independence is admirable until it threatens to say no. "I am not moving out of my home," I said, finally setting the fork down so my hand would stop shaking. "And I'm not giving away the other unit's income. I'm sorry your situation is hard, but this is not reasonable." Bianca's politeness curdled. "I told you she'd be difficult," she said to my mother, not bothering to lower her voice. "She's always been like this." I stood because sitting felt like surrender. "I have work early," I said, and gathered my purse. "We can talk about job leads and housing options. But please stop planning renovations to a place you don't own." On the drive home, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat, relentless as a smoke alarm. I didn't look. I drove to the duplex, unlocked my door, and stood in the threshold. The paint, I'd rolled the floor, I'd sanded the light I'd chosen soft and steady. My pulse slowed, but not enough. I didn't know exactly what would come next. I only knew this. I had worked too long for these keys to hand them over, because someone decided my life takes up more room than I deserve, and somewhere in the kitchen the phone kept buzzing. The next morning my phone started ringing before the coffee finished dripping. Lila didn't bother with hello. "Elena, we need to talk about your behavior," my mother said, voice pitched in that careful injured register that always made me feel 12. Walking out of dinner like that embarrassed everyone. I pressed the mug to my sternum, borrowing its warmth. "Mom, I left because I was blindsided with an expectation to give up my home. That wasn't a conversation. It was an ultimatum. Nobody asked you to give anything up," she replied. Martyrdom seeping into the words. "We asked you to share with your family. That is what families do." "There's a difference between helping and being taken advantage of," I said. "What was proposed last night, me moving out of my own unit, losing the rental income from the other side, and financing renovations I don't want, isn't help. It's surrender. You've always been so independent." She sighed as if naming a flaw. "Not married, no children. You have flexibility, Evan doesn't." There it was again, the arithmetic where my life equaled less. "I'm not going to debate my marital status at 7 in the morning, I said gently. "I love you. I love Evan, but my answer is no. We'll see, she said and hung up. By 9, Martin had texted coffee near your office. Let's be reasonable. I went, because I hoped there was still a version of this where reason could be found. He was already seated when I arrived, 2 cups on the table, the posture of compromise without the content. Princess, he began using the nickname he saved for moments when he wanted compliance. This could be a win for everyone. Evan and Bianca get stability for the twins. You get to help your brother while your other unit is empty. Later, when they're on their feet, they could even buy the place from you. With what dad I asked. They can't qualify for their current rent. Down the road, he said, flicking away the inconvenient present. The point is, this is our family tradition. My father helped me get my first house. Did he ask you to move out of it? I said. Did he insist your brother move in and knock down a wall? That's different, he snapped, then softened. You're being materialistic, Elena. I worked 7 days a week for 5 years. I scraped together $60,000 to get the bank to say yes. I sanded those floors with my hands and a rented tool. That isn't materialism. It's responsibility. He exhaled through his nose, folded his arms and looked at the window as if the glass might take his side. I hope you reconsider what kind of person you want to be. Me too, I said, and left before I made a scene in a cafe that served croissants like clouds. At lunch, my phone buzzed with a new email from Bianca. The subject line read, Duplex updates proposed scope. Against my better judgment, I opened it. 2 pages, bullet points, paint colors, a link to a refrigerator that cost more than my first car. Open the wall between the second bedroom and the office, she wrote, so Leo and Mia have space to play. There was a mood board attached for Elena's new studio near the office, complete with rent estimates I did not want to see. Within an hour, group texts began to bloom like algae. An aunt I hadn't heard from in months wrote, Sweetheart, family is everything. Let the little ones have space. A cousin chimed in, You'll be so blessed for your generosity. On social media, Bianca posted something about finding out who really loves you when you're in need, which gathered hearts and you go mama comments. Watching it happen felt like standing on a beach and realizing the tide had crept around your ankles. By evening, doubt had set up camp behind my ribs. Was I being cold? Miserly, I stared at the walls I'd painted and tried to imagine them a different color because somebody else decided that was better. Before the spiral tightened, I called Maya Torres, my friend from college, who had a talent for cutting through fog without cruelty. She met me at a Thai place near my office and listened while I laid the whole mess on the table between the spring rolls and the jasmine rice. Let me get this straight, she said when I was done. They want you to move out of your unit, hand over the other one, pay for a remodel, and they'll help with the mortgage once life improves. And you're the selfish one for saying no. Put that way, it sounded exactly as outrageous as it was. I felt my shoulders drop an inch. Yes, get numbers, Maya said, not feelings. Numbers. Talk to a financial planner. Talk to a real estate attorney. If the math says you can't do this without setting yourself on fire, you'll need that clarity when the guilt brigade rolls through. She was right. I slept terribly, but I woke with a plan that belonged to me. The next afternoon, I sat across from Caleb Morton, a financial advisor recommended by a colleague in a conference room with a firm that had seen better days. I handed over everything: mortgage statements, rental history, repair receipts, property taxes, insurance, premiums, utilities. Caleb moved through the stack with a pencil and a calculator, making small marks that felt like stitches. All right, he said after a while. If you keep the place as is one side rented at market, you and the other, you're on a stable path. The rental income covers a meaningful chunk of the mortgage and taxes. You're building equity. Good. And if I let them take the rental side and don't charge rent, I asked. He tapped numbers, his brow knitting. You'd be short, roughly the amount you currently collect, call it $20,000 a year, give or take, with vacancies. That gap has to come from somewhere, your salary savings debt. I swallowed. And if I also moved out of my unit and rented somewhere else while they lived in mine, then you lose both the income and incur new rent. Depending on what you pay for an apartment near your office, you're looking at a negative swing closer to $40,000 annually. My mouth tasted like pennies. And Bianca's renovations, he glanced at the list I'd printed and slid across the table. Opening a wall isn't free. Appliances at this tier aren't either. Even with mid-range finishes, you're in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. More if there are surprises. There are always surprises. He pushed the paper back to me like it was evidence. Multiply the annual losses by 3 to 5 years, tack on renovations, and you're somewhere between the cost of a second down payment and a financial pit that will take a decade to climb out of. The number in my head wasn't exact, but the shape of it was heavy. Okay, I said softly. Thank you. One more thing, he added. You and I are talking dollars. A lawyer needs to talk to you about risk. Family arrangements without contracts are how people end up on the news. I booked Renee Patel, a real estate attorney with a voice like a metronome and the patience of a saint. She didn't bother with niceties. I gave her the landscape and she began to draw the map. First, she said, do not allow occupancy without a lease. Not for a weekend, not for a night. In many jurisdictions, time creates rights. If you give anyone a foothold, you inherit a headache. I nodded, scribbling. Lease at market rate. Security deposit. Clear terms about damages, alterations. Guess end date, Renee continued. And if they're not willing to sign because we're family, that tells you everything about how they intend to treat your property. Should I change the locks? I asked, embarrassed to hear myself ask it. Yesterday, she said. Not because they're villains, because ambiguity invites bad decisions. When I left her office, the February sky looked like brushed steel. I drove straight to a locksmith, apologized for the rush, and had both units rekeyed by dusk. The clunk of new deadbolts soothed something primitive in me. With the property physically secure, I turned to the vacancy that had become the opening my family wanted to pry. Derek's move-out date was 2 weeks away. I photographed the space in good light, wrote a clear listing priced at a hair under market to attract serious applicants fast, and posted it everywhere responsible people look. The inbox filled overnight. I scheduled showings back-to-back for Saturday and spent Friday evening wiping baseboards and setting a plate of store-bought cookies on the counter because I am my mother's daughter in at least one way. Among the applicants, Mina Ortiz and Gabriel Park stood out. Both were medical residents at the university hospital, polite, exhausted in that physician-in-training way, delighted by a landlord who knew where the shut-off valves were and answered questions in complete sentences. They loved the small shared garden on the side, the quiet street, the fact that I'd replaced the ancient smoke detectors with smart ones. We're rarely home, Mina said, smiling apologetically. When we are, all we want is a place that doesn't fall apart. Their references were immaculate. Their income was modest but reliable, their credit good, their expectations sane. By Monday, I'd run the checks, drafted a 2-year lease, and sent it to Renee for review. We added clauses about no subletting, no alterations without written permission, reasonable quiet hours, and a penalty schedule that made mischief unappealing. They signed on Wednesday. Derek would hand over his keys on Friday, and Mina and Gabriel would move in Sunday. There would be no gap. When the lease PDFs hit my inbox, relief arrived so quickly I had to sit down. A piece of the puzzle clicked into place with a sound I could feel. The reprieve lasted until dinner time when Martin called. Your mother wants us all over Sunday, he said, as if the choice had already been made. We're going to settle this like adults. Dad, I said carefully, I've signed a lease with new tenants for the other unit. It's no longer available. Silence. Then a measured tone I recognized from childhood, the one that prefaced consequences. That was unwise. It was necessary, I answered. I need the income to pay the mortgage. I'm happy to talk housing options for Evan and Bianca, but the duplex is not on the table. We'll see, he said again, and I wondered when my parents started borrowing each other's phrases like sweaters. I went Sunday because not going would only feed the story where I was the unreasonable one. The dining room looked staged for arbitration, the good china, the extra leaf in the table, a folder at each setting like we were board members about to review quarterly losses. Evan and Bianca arrived last. Bianca carried a thick binder with tabs. My stomach did a small, tight roll. Martin cleared his throat. We're here to come to a family agreement, he said, very official. No raised voices, no walking out. Lila squeezed my fingers, performative tenderness for the audience. We just want to find a solution that works for everyone. Bianca opened her binder and started passing color printouts around the table. Floor plans, swatches, contractor quotes. We've thought carefully about how to make the space functional for the twins, she said in a brisk meeting room voice. This wall comes down obviously. The kitchen needs a full update. We'd extend the back patio. I held up a palm. Stop. None of this is happening. Evan winced. Martin frowned. Lila looked wounded. Bianca's mouth flattened. "We haven't even discussed terms yet," she said. "It's not fair to—" "Fair," I repeated. Fair would have been asking before designing. Fair would have been acknowledging that I own this property and I pay for it. Martin slid a paper across to me with a flourish. "This will make you feel better," he said. The title at the top read Family Housing Understanding. The language beneath it was soft and slippery. Elena to provide housing for Evan, and Bianca for a minimum period of 3 years. Family to revisit contributions as finances improve. Renovation expenses to be shared. Elena to relocate to comparable housing in the meantime. It wasn't a contract. It was a trap written in calligraphy. "No," I said and pushed it back untouched. "Elena." My mother whispered like a prayer gone hoarse. "Be reasonable." "I am," I said. "I've been reasonable for years. Reasonable as helping Evan with his resume. Reasonable as loaning money with repayment plans. Reasonable is researching affordable apartments and first-time homebuyer programs and childcare options and handing them to you in a neat folder. I've done all of that and more. Handing over my home is not reasonable." Bianca leaned forward, eyes bright with anger. "We already gave notice at our place. We have to be out by the end of the month. You did that," I said, "before I agreed to anything. That's not on me." Evan rubbed his temples. "Elena, please. We just need a few years." "Years," I repeated, hearing my own breath steady. "Evan, look at the numbers." I slid the packet I had prepared into the center, a simple summary of Caleb's analysis with round figures and clean charts. "If I do what you're asking, I lose tens of thousands of dollars a year. Add renovations, and we're talking about a hole I may not be able to climb out of. That's not support. That's sabotage." Martin's voice hardened. "If you walk out of here without agreeing, you're choosing property over family." Something inside me, something I had been strengthening in small ways for years, stood up. "No," I said as calmly as I could. "I am choosing self-respect over enabling. There's a difference." Lila began to cry. Bianca snapped her binder shut like a gavel. Evan stared at the tablecloth. I collected my bag. "I'm not signing that," I added, nodding toward the paper. "And I've secured the property. The other unit is under a 2-year lease. The locks have been changed. Please don't try to enter without me. If you need me to, I'll help you make calls tomorrow about apartments you can actually afford." I left to a chorus of protest tears and a tight, angry silence that felt like weather before a storm. Back home, I set the folder of numbers on my kitchen table and touched the edge of it like you might touch the edge of a compass. I knew this wasn't over. People who have always been rescued don't accept no on the first hearing. But I had facts now. I had a lease. I had locks. And maybe most importantly, I had a version of myself I recognized, a woman who could be kind without being consumed. The next days were loud. Texts from relatives. A message from a family friend. "Your poor mother." A thinly veiled post from Bianca about gatekeeping resources. I muted what I could, answered what was human to answer, and returned my attention to work and the tenants who would move in on Sunday. I bought fresh smoke alarm batteries and a plunger because life is practical even in the middle of a drama. On Friday evening, Derek handed me his keys and we did a final walkthrough. He thanked me for being a decent landlord. I thanked him for not breaking the oven. We laughed. It felt normal, which was its own kind of miracle. Sunday morning, Mina and Gabriel pulled up in a compact car that looked held together by caffeine and hope. I handed over their set of keys, walked them through the shutoffs and trash day, and left them to their boxes. The sound of tape ripping in the next unit was the best soundtrack I could have asked for. An hour later, my phone lit with Evan's name. I considered letting it ring out. I answered. "Hey," he said, awkward and small. "We saw the cars." "Yeah," I said, not filling the silence for him. "My tenants moved in." He cleared his throat. "Bianca is furious." "I figured," I said. "I'm not doing this to hurt you." "I know," he said after a long beat. I don't know what to do." "Start with what you can control," I said. "I sent you listings last week for a complex that's a lot cheaper than your current place. Riverbend Commons. They have 3 bedrooms open next month. I'll help you apply if you want. I can also run mock interviews again, but I'm not giving you my house." On the line, I heard something that sounded like air leaving a balloon. "Okay," he said, not defeated exactly, but deflated. "Okay." After we hung up, I stood at my kitchen sink and watched the light shift across the counter. I had chosen the faucet I had installed. Somewhere through the shared wall, a new neighbor laughed at something the other had said. I liked that sound. It meant the house was doing what I had bought it to do, shelter steadily on terms that made sense. By Tuesday, I was done letting the story be told about me. I texted a simple invitation to Martin, Lila, Evan, and Bianca, Saturday 10 a.m. My place. I'll present options and the facts. Please come ready to discuss solutions that don't require my home. No one replied that night. On Wednesday, Lila sent a thumbs up. Thursday, Evan texted, "We'll be there." Bianca posted a meme about women guarding empty castles, which I took as her RSVP. I prepared like it was an audit. I printed Caleb's summaries in plain English, not accountant ease what the rental brings in, what I'd lose if I gave it up, what moving out would cost me. A conservative estimate for the remodel Bianca wanted with a second column for surprises, because there are always surprises. I compiled Renee's legal notes, tenant rights by occupancy, time risks of informal arrangements, why locks and leases matter. I called 3 apartment complexes within 20 minutes of Evan's work and pulled availability floor plans and income requirements. Riverbend Commons had 3 bedrooms at $1,500. Maplewood Terrace had a 2+ den for $1, $375. Harbor Oaks offered move-in specials that covered half the deposit. I even drafted a sample repayment agreement in case I loaned them a security deposit. Friday night, Maya came over with takeout and a yellow highlighter. "You're doing this the right way," she said, dotting exclamation points beside the phrases. Market rate, lease, security deposit, and no alterations without written consent. Then she made me role-play the worst-case opening salvo. Bianca, accusing Martin, moralizing. Lila crying, Evan silent, until my answer sounded like muscle memory, not apology. Saturday morning, I stacked 4 labeled folders on my dining table, set out coffee and pastries, and opened the front curtain so the room felt less like a courtroom and more like a home. Through the wall, Mina and Gabriel clinked mugs and laughed softly at something the other said. It steadied me. They arrived at 10:07, a family habit of being slightly late and acting as if the clock owed them gratitude. Martin went formal pressed shirt, chin lifted. Lila wore worry like perfume. Evan had the look of someone who'd slept badly. Bianca carried a tote bag thick with papers and the kind of certainty you laminate. "Thanks for coming," I said. "Please sit." Bianca didn't. "Before you start," she said, sliding a color printout onto the table, "we met with a contractor. If you agree today, he can demo the wall next week. We'll split costs 50-50 and—" "Pause," I said, palm up, keeping my voice even. "No walls are coming down. Nothing is being renovated. Let me walk you through what I've prepared." I passed out the folders. On top, a 1-page overview titled, "What My Home Currently Pays For." I let them read. Martin's mouth tightened at the second bullet. Rental income covers 40% of mortgage plus taxes, as if math had taken a side. "This is where things stand," I said. "Now if I do what you've asked, give you the rental side rent-free, or swap with me so you take my unit, and I pay rent elsewhere, this is what happens." I flipped the page. A clean bar chart showed the negative swing. "I lose around $20,000 a year in the first scenario, closer to 40 if I move out and rent somewhere near my office." "It's not always about money," Lila whispered. "It is when the question is who pays the mortgage." I said not unkindly, "These aren't luxuries, they're obligations." Bianca flicked a glance at Evan, then back at me. "We said we'd help with the mortgage." When I asked, "For how much?" "With what written agreement? What happens if ours get cut again?" "What happens if you disagree about paint, but the wall is already gone? I'm not asking to be difficult. I'm asking because I've seen what happens when families trust instead of sign." Martin slid his folder aside like a plate he wasn't eating. "Our family has always helped each other without contracts. Then our family has also always left women to sort out the fallout," I said before I could stop myself. The sentence landed with a quiet thud. Lila flinched. Evan lifted his eyes like he'd heard something new. I took a breath. "Look, I'm not here to punish you. I'm here with alternatives that won't bankrupt me and might actually help you long term." I turned the page to housing options. Riverbend Commons has a 3-bed for $1,500. Maplewood's 2+ den is more like $13.75, but the den could be a kid's room. Harbor Oaks is running a move-in special, half the security deposit first month prorated if you sign before the 15th. Bianca exhaled the way people do when a plane lands with a bump. We can't afford first and last and a deposit. I know, I said, sliding the final page across the table. Security deposit loan sample terms. I'm willing to loan you the deposit and first half of the first month with a simple written repayment schedule you can actually meet. No interest if you pay on time. If you miss 2 payments, the balance becomes due and we reassess. I'll also watch Leo and Mia one evening a week if you... I looked at Bianca, pick up a part-time job during school hours. And I'll help Evan prep for interviews. None of this requires my house. Evan's face did something like relief and shame at the same time. This actually helps, he said, thumbing the edges of the paper. Riverbend's the one you mentioned on the phone, right? Yes, I said. I called. They have 2 units opening on the 1st. Martin leaned back, crossing his arms. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. If you were generous, we wouldn't be here. If I were reckless, we wouldn't be here, I answered. Generosity without boundaries is how people drown quietly. Bianca snapped. We already gave notice. We have to be out by the 30th. That was your decision, I said, and it's solvable with these options. But it doesn't obligate me to forfeit the home I worked for. Silence stretched taut and humming. Through the wall, Mina's kettle clicked off. Somewhere on the street, a dog barked twice and stopped. Evan cleared his throat. What's the Riverbend income requirement? He asked, voice small but steady. 2.5 times rent, I said. You meet it with your current hours. If Bianca takes the school job she told me she was considering last year, you're clear. They'll want pay stubs. I already have the email of the leasing agent. Bianca turned to him incredulous. You're seriously entertaining this? I'm seriously trying to solve where our kids sleep in 3 weeks, he said, and the quiet weight of our kids landed like a coin in a jar that had been empty too long. Martin pushed his chair back, the skid making everyone blink. If you walk out of here without your sister's keys, don't come crying when life is hard. Dad, I said. Keeping my tone even, threats won't change the math. And there are no keys for you to take. The other unit is under a signed 2-year lease. I held up the copy with names redacted. This is non-negotiable. Lila's eyes filled. We just wanted the twins to have a yard, she whispered. They will, I said softly. Riverbend has a playground. Maplewood has a courtyard. Harbor Oaks sits next to a park. You can visit. I'll bring snacks. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Evan gathered the papers, aligning the edges like someone trying to make order out of a morning gone sideways. We'll look at Riverbend this afternoon, he said, if they'll show on a weekend. I called yesterday, I said. They will. I penciled you in for 2 p.m. with Kara. Tell her you're my brother. Bianca stared at me, anger and calculation clashing behind her eyes. You orchestrated all of this. I prepared, I said. There's a difference. She stood, then sat, then covered her face with both hands and exhaled slowly. When she looked up, some of the heat had gone out of her voice. I don't want your charity. It's not charity, I said. It's a loan, with terms, and a schedule, and dignity on both sides. Martin rose as if called to a different room by an invisible voice. We're done here, he said. Come on, Lila. Lila glanced between us, torn. Thank you for the coffee, she said the smallest of truces and followed him out. On the porch, Evan lingered. I'm not promising Bianca will be pleasant, he said, but I hear you. I'm tired of scrambling. I don't want my kids to learn that crises are normal. I know, I said. Text me after the showing. I'll be home. They left. The house exhaled. I refilled the coffee, sat at the table I'd sanded, and let my body feel how much energy it takes to hold a line without swinging a sword. Through the wall, Mina and Gabriel's radio played something light and wordless. The sound felt like a future ordinary breathable. At 3:12 p.m. my phone buzzed. Evan Riverbend was good. Kids love the playground. They said we qualify if we bring the pay stubs Monday. Deposit is $1,500. Move in first. I stared, then typed, I'll loan the deposit. We'll sign the repayment note tonight. Proud of you. Dots. Pause. More dots. Evan, thank you. I'll tell Bianca we're taking it. I leaned my forehead against the cool window pane and closed my eyes. It wasn't triumph. It was relief, braided with grief for how hard we'd made something that could have been simple. It would still get messy. People don't pivot in a day. But the story was moving finally in a direction that didn't require me to disappear to prove I love them. At 6:40, they came back without the children. Bianca's mouth was a straight line. Evan held a manila envelope. At my table, we filled in the blanks of the repayment note amount date signatures. Bianca read every line as if looking for a trap and found none. When she signed, she did it without flair, a practical thing done because the sun sets whether you sign or not. On their way out, Bianca paused at the threshold. "I still think stainless would look better in your kitchen," she said, not quite smiling. "I like quiet appliances," I said. "Stainless is loud." A huff that might have been a laugh. "We pick up the keys on the first," she said. "Kara said she'll waive the application fee if we bring a cashier's check." "She told me she might," I said. "Good night." When the door closed, I stood in the entryway with the quiet like a shawl. The house felt like mine again, not because I'd won, but because I'd chosen not to lose myself inside someone else's emergency. I washed the mugs. I put away the folders. I texted Maya a single line. It worked at least for today. Her reply came back immediately. Proud. Boundaries are love with a backbone. I slept not perfectly, but without the jerk of a house falling out from under me. Morning brought a new kind of noise. Leo and Mia recording a voice message saying they love the playground slide at the new home Lila, forwarding a link to a too expensive townhome just to see Martin silent. I brewed coffee and opened my laptop to pay the mortgage. Each click was its own small vow. Keep the thing you worked for. Keep the self you built to work for it. Move-in day at Riverbend Commons looked like every fresh start I've ever believed in. Cardboard scraped against carpet, a hot wind tugged at the stairwell flyers, and 2 5-year-olds debated which room had the faster closet. Evan carried boxes like a man who had finally chosen a direction. Bianca came armed with a roll of labels and a face set to neutral. I brought pizza paper towels and a copy of the repayment note tucked into a folder. We ticked off a checklist utilities trash day, the gate code, the playground rules. When I left, Leo and Mia were racing circles around a maple tree shrieking, "Our slide," as if they had invented gravity. The first payment arrived on the dot, then the next one and the next. I texted Maya a picture of the ledger with 3 neat check marks. "This is what responsibility looks like in pencil," she replied. Evan sent pictures of their new budget taped to the fridge rows and boxes. A little messy, honest. On Thursdays, I took the twins for dinner and homework. Bianca picked up a part-time job at the elementary school noon to 3, the exact hours she once said were impossible. She still complained on social media, but less like a siren and more like weather. 2 months in, Evan called from the warehouse parking lot. They offered me logistics coordinator, he said, all air and disbelief. Regular hours. More pay. I whooped in a voice memo loud enough to scare the pigeons off my railing. We adjusted his repayment schedule up by a little his suggestion, not mine. When the twins needed cleats for a rec league, Evan bought them without asking anyone for help and texted me the receipt proud as a report card. It took my parents longer to find a new shape. Lila invited me to lunch and did not bring up stainless steel appliances. She asked about my tenants instead, how Mina and Gabriel were settling in, whether the shared garden was growing. They planted basil, I said. It smells like a kitchen that knows what it's doing. Lila smiled like she could taste it. A week later, she called again, voice soft. "I'm starting to see your side," she said. "Helping is harder than I thought." It wasn't an apology. It was a bridge. Martin stayed silent until the 3rd month, when a Sunday dinner resumed like a show after intermission. He carved roast chicken with meticulous care and avoided my eyes until dessert. "You didn't bend," he said, finally, as if delivering a weather report he had resisted. "I don't agree with how you handled it." He cleared his throat. "But I respect that you handled it." Coming from my father, respect was rarer than apologies. I took it and didn't try to turn it into anything else. At the duplex, life clicked on its rails. Mina and Gabriel paid rent on time and left Rosemary by my door after their rotation in the ICU went dark. The smart detectors chirped politely when their batteries were tired, which still felt like a miracle after the old brass fixtures that hummed at midnight. On Saturday mornings, I trimmed the lavender along the path and waved at neighbors who had decided I belonged here. I did. With steadiness came bandwidth. I opened a spreadsheet labeled Next Property Early Research and began to sketch what a second purchase would require. Caleb and I ran scenarios over coffee interest rates, if they dropped a quarter point, what a small multifamily might carry, how much reserve would let me sleep. Renee reviewed a template lease and grinned when she found nothing to red pen. "Look at you," she said, "risk managing like a symphony." There were still awkward pockets of weather. Bianca's sister posted a dig about gatekeeping wealth that earned 12 likes and one eye roll from me. At a cookout, a cousin asked if I was still in that little place, as if growing meant square footage. I changed the subject to the twins' soccer game and learned I could love a child's perfect slide tackle more than I disliked a snide remark. 6 months after Riverbend. Evan met me for coffee and arrived early, a novelty worth noting. He'd brought an envelope. Inside were 3 extra payments. "Holiday money," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Thought we'd get ahead. I don't want to owe you a favor forever." I told him he never would, that the point of a schedule was to end it. He looked out the window, then back at me. "I'm starting to like the feeling of doing things on time," he said, and something unwound in my chest. That night, I walked the duplex the way you walk a memory, slowly tracing the edges. I touched the countertop I'd chosen and the faucet I'd installed. Through the wall, Mina laughed at something Gabriel said. In my unit, the kettle clicked off the same small sound it had made the night I changed the locks. I thought of the sentence Maya had texted months ago. "Boundaries are love with a backbone," and realized it had become not just advice but architecture. I used to think saying no meant shutting a door. Now it feels like opening the right one and standing there welcoming with both hands free. I didn't save my brother by letting him inside my house. I loved him enough to insist he build his own. My parents did not collapse when I declined to be their spare room. They learned where I end, and they begin. And me, I stopped measuring my worth against the shape of someone else's emergency. On the 1st of the month, I paid the mortgage from my kitchen table. Through the window, the lavender nodded in a breeze that smelled faintly of basil. Across town, Leo and Mia were arguing about whose turn it was to feed the goldfish. At Riverbend, Bianca would be closing the classroom door behind her, and Evan would be counting pallets instead of problems. My house was quiet, and in that quiet I heard it clearly, the sound of a life I had chosen and kept. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.